Canadians on both the left and the right are furious about the way this critical Canadian problem is being handled, and I'm pretty frustrated too, albeit for a different reason entirely. You've probably already heard about the election interference scandal with countless different allegations, all connected to the Chinese government potentially impacting the last two Canadian elections. But now, as a proposed solution to this, the Prime Minister has appointed a special investigator who he says will get to the bottom of this issue, but critics have pointed out that perhaps this special investigator is too closely tied to the Trudeau family. Meanwhile, both the Conservatives and the NDP have absolutely handcuffed the current government into letting a key witness testify at an upcoming committee meeting, something that the government fought really heavily against. Let's start with this handcuffing story and we'll get into the absolute craziness that is the appointing of this special investigator. And if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel to keep on getting Canadian-focused updates just like this one. It all centers around this person, Katie Telford, who is the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, essentially Trudeau's right-hand woman, the person who sort of coordinates his days and sort of organizes his office and the way all of the people around him work. Now, the NDP and the Conservatives want Telford to talk at this committee hearing because they think that she might know what the Prime Minister was told about this Chinese interference and at what point he was told this, because she would have been there for any of these briefings. They think that the secrets could come out if she talks at committee. But the Liberals and Trudeau really don't want her to testify. Now, critics of the government would say that this is because this could make the Prime Minister look bad. Maybe Telford has some sort of dirt on Trudeau that they don't want out there. But the Liberals say that's not true, and the only reason they don't want her to testify is because she wouldn't be the person with the most information on this matter, and they're saying that the Conservatives just want her to testify as a way to make the Prime Minister look bad as part of their partisan games. Here's the Liberal House leader making these claims to some frustrated reporters.
I think that the move to have the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff is a political move. It is not a move aimed at trying to get answers or try to get information. It's a opportunity for the Conservatives to play politics. And what I'm saying is that as a first principle, let's step back and acknowledge that any form of foreign interference is an attack against democracy. It's an attack against every person is in this place. I am not aware of a member of Parliament who has not dedicated their life to Canadian democracy. They would not be in this place if that was not the case. I'm sure it's as sure of my adversaries as it's sure of me. And that if we are going to broach the issue of foreign interference, dialing back partisanship, I would say, is key. Their obsession and particular focus on the Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, I think, is evidence of a partisan interest and not an interest in information.
But despite the Liberals not wanting Katie Telford to testify, the committee handling the investigation tabled a motion that would force her to testify. But once the motion was tabled, well, the Liberals proceeded to filibuster the committee, essentially not allowing the motion to go forward, not allowing there to be a vote on this motion that would force this testimony, instead filling the entirety of the meeting with points of order and things that would drag out the proceedings so they'd never actually get to the vote. But then, outside of the committee in the House of Commons, the actual full House of Commons, the Conservatives tabled another motion that would force her to testify even if this committee motion didn't go through. But in order for this House of Commons motion to pass, well, the NDP would have to break their agreement with the Liberals and vote in favor of this Conservative motion. Now, here's the rather surprising thing that NDP leader Jagmeet Singh did in response.
So today, if the Liberal government, if Justin Trudeau doesn't stop the obstruction that's going on in committee, if Justin Trudeau doesn't allow his Chief of Staff to testify, we will force him to do so by voting with the Opposition Day motion. We're going to make it very clear that we believe in doing everything possible to make sure Canadians have their questions answered so we can restore confidence in our electoral system.
So essentially he's saying that if the Liberals don't stop their filibustering in committee, that the NDP will vote in favor of the Conservative motion, forcing Telford to testify regardless of what happens in the committee meeting. Now, in response to this, Trudeau and the Liberals finally allowed the vote to go through inside of the committee, meaning that the PM's Chief of Staff will be testifying at a later date.
So we forced the government to stop the obstruction in committee and to have the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister testify, which renders the Conservative motion useless.
So you didn't have any negotiations with them? There was no conversation with Mr. Trudeau or his staff to make it so that it was at proc instead of ethics?
We have conversations regularly, so we always have conversations. But this was clearly New Democrats saying you can stop the obstruction or we're going to support the vote.
So the NDP have used their power that they have as a minority government to force Telford to testify, but critics of the NDP are saying that they essentially made a deal with the Liberals to not vote in favor of the Conservative motion, since the motion also included more stipulations and additional testimony. So they're saying, okay, well, you made a deal with the Liberals to get this committee vote passed, but you didn't vote in favor of the Conservative motion in the House of Commons. But regardless, the NDP did force Telford to testify. But this wasn't even the most ridiculous drama of the week, not by a landslide. That came in the form of the appointment of former Governor General David Johnston as this special investigator or rapporteur who will be deciding the next steps on this China interference issue and whether or not we have a public inquiry. Now, some people are absolutely pissed about this appointment because of the connections between David Johnston and the Trudeau family.
We really have to wonder, what is it that he has to hide? And it is Justin Trudeau that has put Mr. Johnston in this terrible situation by naming a member of the China-financed Trudeau Foundation to perform this role of looking into Beijing's interference in our election campaigns. That was Justin Trudeau's error in judgment. And all of this points to him covering up the truth because he's afraid that Canadians will find out how he failed to stand up for our interests and instead stood up for his own.
And to a certain extent, it's fair to make these criticisms. Here's some clips of Trudeau himself sort of describing his relationship with David Johnston.
I've known the Governor General since I was a kid, from visiting him and his daughters when he was principal at McGill, to spending time on the ice or the slopes at their family home in the Laurentians.
A lot of Canadians don't realize that you, in fact, were a very good friend of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and that your family, you knew all the Trudeau kids when they were growing up.
His three boys were the same age as our five daughters, so we were kind of a ski party from time to time at Mont Tremblant, where we have a place and would ski on weekends. So we got to know the children, and our friendship, our relationship was really built out of childhood exchanges.
But at the same time, there is some credibility here because it was the previous Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper who actually appointed David Johnston as Governor General, and he can be seen here advocating for David Johnston's credibility.
I'm pleased to announce that Dr. David Johnston, who is the president of Waterloo, he's also the former Dean of Law at Western, the former principal of McGill, and he has served numerous governments in various public policy capacities. I'm pleased to announce that he has agreed to be the independent third person. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, Dr. Johnston has served various governments in various public policy capacities, and we certainly appreciate his willingness to serve once again.
So we see Stephen Harper appointing him into a similar situation where he's the independent third party between the Liberals and the Conservatives on a certain issue. Now, my view on this, well, it actually is more similar to the view of the leader of the Bloc Québécois. I'll show you a clip of what he said, and then I'll get into some more detail.
I don't want to judge about the man himself. I met him a few times. He seemed quite a gentleman to me. However, if you want to make the population feel safe about the choice that you have made, you should pick someone who is not notably and admittedly a friend of the family. I have nothing against him. I just think that the Prime Minister should promote his own credibility by picking people who are not, from the very beginning, friends of him.
And I see things pretty much in the same way. There's lots of evidence pointing to David Johnston being a very respected member of the community, someone who can be bipartisan and not really take any political side, so it would kind of make sense for him to be in a role such as this. But on the flip side of things, if you're Trudeau, you know that people are going to look into this extremely heavily, and they're going to see that not only do you know David Johnston, and that you're a close family friend with him, but also that he's a member of the board of the foundation in your father's name. These are clear areas that Trudeau must have seen before making this appointment, and it would make so much more sense for him to choose somebody else who doesn't have these connections if he truly wants to assure Canadians that everything is being done on the up and up here. But what I'm most frustrated about these days, and it's gotten me pretty heated, is how challenging it's becoming to actually decipher what is a partisan game, or the scoring of political points for political points' sake, and what is actually valid criticism. Lately, the Liberals and Trudeau have been classifying the Conservatives' points about this situation as just a selfish way for them to make the Prime Minister look bad, and at times, given the tone used, well, it does seem like this is the case in certain situations. But at the very same time, the fact that Trudeau and the Liberals are filibustering committees and secondly, so heavily labeling the Conservatives as playing horrific partisan games is in and of itself extremely partisan in my eyes. I mean, just listen to this clip of Trudeau's response after being asked about the linkages between David Johnston and the Trudeau family.
He has served in many capacities, and the integrity and the character that he has demonstrated every step of the way is absolutely unimpeachable. There is no better name than David Johnston, which makes it so astonishing, but also so clarifying to see the Conservative Party simply not interested in actually getting answers. They are engaging in horrific, partisan attacks against a man of extraordinary integrity. And if everyone needed a really clear indication that partisanship is more important to Conservatives than actual facts and reality, their completely unfounded attacks on David Johnston are exactly that.
Again, perhaps David Johnston is fully nonpartisan and will act in such a way during this role as a special rapporteur, and any relationship with the Trudeau family is something that he'll be able to look past and report in a nonpartisan way. This is something that I do believe could actually be possible, but Trudeau says that David Johnston is being criticized by the Conservatives when that's simply not the case. Everyone agrees that he has a storied and respected career. What's being criticized is the connection between David Johnston and Trudeau, who is at the center of this issue. And it makes it seem like Trudeau's just intentionally playing dumb here, dumb to the fact that even if Johnston acts in a fully impartial way, which we all expect him to, many Canadians just simply won't believe that he's acted in such a way because of the connections to Trudeau and his family. Why not just, like the Bloc leader said, pick someone who doesn't have any history with you and use this as an opportunity to build your credibility? Pick someone that has no clear connections to you so that everyone can credibly believe that this person will act impartially. But again, it's incredibly hard to sift through this political bullshit and to get any idea of what politicians are actually advocating on behalf of Canadians and which ones are in it for their own self-interests, you know? More and more, I'm thinking that most of the time, for most politicians, it's the second option these days. Well, that's it for me for this video. I hope you found this video helpful. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you next time.